Hello, folks. So I want to go over something a little bit interesting. Doing my research down the rabbit hole of the 996, 911. These were the first water-cooled cars beginning in 1999, and this is my 99 911 996 C2, which means Carrera 2, rear-wheel drive, and it's a 6-speed manual. The only way to roll, in my opinion, but to each his own. And wanted to talk about some uniqueness to this first year model, some things that are on Rennlist and some other sites that are pretty fascinating about the very early production cars. Now, I believe Europe started in 1998 with the first water-cooled 996. As you may or may not know, the 993 was the last air-cooled, and this replaced that last air-cooled generation of the 911 with this. And Porsche did it for many reasons. One was to meet more stringent emissions. Water cooling helped get the emissions better under control. You get a little bit more horsepower, obviously, when you water cool, and also they wanted to increase the size a bit of the car. It's not a whole lot bigger than the 993, but it is. If you put it side by side, you can see the difference for safety reasons. But when they separate the first year production, which is the one I sought after, this is the 99, of course, like I said. The early production cars are actually becoming more sought after. And what I mean by that is the very early production cars. As most cars, as you see for a model year, the production cycle, especially for a new model change, can begin the prior year. So if it's, a 2022, it could be 2021, they start production on it usually late. Now, what's ironic about this car, and not so ironic in a sense because it's the American market versus the European market, this car was produced in Europe in about 98, I believe. And maybe somebody can correct me on that. And we didn't start getting it until the 99 model here in America, in North America. I'm not sure about Canada, but here we didn't get it. But so this car right here, if you go by the serial number, and I got a Carfax, it shows a build of about 498. So being a 99, that's pretty early in the previous year. Now, there's many things that make the early productions of the 99 versus the later production interesting. Most of them have this amber, the 99s have the amber front headlights. That's part of the early 99 first year productions. But I'm going to go off my sheet here. And this is off a Rennlist. And, of course, these cars have the dual roll IMS bearing. They do have the throttle by cable, old school cable, I should say. And let me open the hood on that. And I'll explain what I mean for those who may not understand. So if you look right here, that is a cable that goes right to the gas pedal in the car. This is the last of that generation, and all the previous generations had throttle by cable. After about mid-2000, they switched this to throttle by wire. I guess they think they call it throttle by wire, but it's actually a motor. It's like a servo that takes the input from the gas pedal and electrical signal, and it varies the throttle given your input. So a lot of people find that, kind of cool to have the old school of the 996 versus some people don't care. I do care. I think it's really neat, and that's why I sought after this car. I knew some of the things being an early production car, but I didn't know some of the other cool things. One is, if you look at later production 996s, like after 2000 or 2001, I believe, this headliner, this is like a vinyl headliner. This is off the 993. I'm not sure if it's off the previous air-cooled models, but it's the same headliner off the 993. Matter of fact, this car being an early production 4 of 98 car, this was produced on the 993 assembly line as the last of the 993s were being phased out. So, does that matter much? No, but they're a little bit more hand-built on the first early generations before they went, and I'm going to get into that too, before they went into more production, robotic production with the later 996s and following cars, 997 and 991, 992. So Let me pull my sheet here, and I want to cover some of the other interesting aspects of the early production car. Put a fat finger in front of the lens here. I'm doing my Samsung phone. People cite like no nannies. You could get this car with limited slip. My car doesn't have limited slip. Matter of fact, it's almost you almost don't see limited slip ordered that much. I mean, there's cars out there, but if you were to wait to try to find a limited slip like 99996, it would be a long wait. I mean, they do come up. I never came across them. It was the 220, which my 928 has the same code back in 79. So 20 years later, they're using the same code. I don't know if they use the same code today. Later cars had more nanny, like the stability control, which, this one I think you could order it just with. I'm not sure if you could get this with traction control and limited slip, or just limited slip without the traction control. But I think you could just get the limited slip differential. And like, if anybody wants to correct me on that, please feel free. Some of the other things were, it's got the granite top cover of the dash. They call it the buffalo hide. So a lot of the dashboard's a little bit different than the later cars. They call it buffalo hide dash. And this is almost like a painted with infused granite plastic. Let me see if I can go around. I'll show you. And if you have a later model 996, like a 2001, you'll notice the difference. So I don't know if this is going to go. Oh, this will show up. But you can see it's kind of like I don't know if it's like a metallic or whatever, but it's different than the later cars. So that's a different attribute. And I'm going off my sheet again off Renlist. So thank you, Renlist, the person who created this. Because I knew of some of them, I didn't know of all of them. So it has no OBC on the dashboard, computer. That I didn't know. So that was pretty cool. The other thing is, this car, being a 4 of 98 car, around mid-year, there was a plant fire at Porsche. And in that plant fire, before the fire, they had set aside blocks that they had x-rayed. And this is a story I've read, and I tried to research as much as possible to make sure I'm not spewing out misinformation. But they had blocks that they shelved, that they x-rayed. I don't know why they would have shelved them and not just threw them back in the melting pot and just remolded them. Supposedly they had shelved a whole bunch of blocks that they x-rayed that weren't passable. And then till when the fire hit, supposedly they allowed those blocks because now they were down on production because their other castings that passed. And I may be mangling this, but this is what I've read. And if anybody knows any different, please go ahead and chime in. They reused out of little choice to keep production moving on this car, because this was the car during their midst of their near bankruptcy that actually helped pull them out. Well, they're in the Boxster also as well, which this shares pretty much from the door to the front, the back of the door. Most of the components are almost identical. There might be a few bits in the interior that are a little bit different, but many people, it really upset them. It never upset me, because the best part about it is, you can't find parts for any old air-cooled 911s that easily. But with this car, you could probably go to this might be the first 911, you can go to a salvage yard and find parts for the front part of the car dirt cheap. And I mean, it is a driver's car. The 996 right now, as we said, is becoming a little bit more pedigree, I would say. Before, it was just considered, the budget entry price, and it still is, but prices are starting to go up. And then our people are trying to find the earliest production cars. There's some cars that go all the way. Obviously, if there were cars in Europe, those cars may or may not be importable over to the United States. But I have seen in America, people have shown in their build dates on their door 2 of 98. So this is, and you can tell by the VIN number that's in the, you can look up the VIN and kind of reference it on. There's a database on Renlist that people are going off of, which correlates to the years and the months of production. So it's pretty fascinating stuff. So in appearance-wise, I mean, nothing really seems to be that much different than later cars. Do I think like the interior rattles less or anything? I mean, my interior doesn't rattle, but do some cars rattle versus later cars? I don't know. I don't know if there's a big difference in the quality. I mean, saying that a lot of people like to cite because the 993 is so popular, and of course the 993 is over $100,000 car, even high mileage today. As of filming this December of 2023, you can't, especially post COVID. I know prices for at least a coupe, a manual coupe 993, mid 90s. You're looking over 100,000 or close to 100,000 if you're lucky. And if it's 100,000, it's probably got 150,000 miles or 120,000 miles on it, and it's got some paint chips, and it's just a good running example, nothing restored or anything, because the 993 is coveted because it was the last air cooled car, and it should be. I would love to get a 993. I actually, when I set out to buy a 911 in 2015, being a 928 owner, I had another 928 prior to that. It was an auto. That's a manual. And I got to get cracking on that one. It needs a fuel tank. It's got a crack in a fuel tank, plastic tank. But the thing is that this car being kind of now sought after for its attributes of being early production. Do I know, can I validate that story? I find that story somewhat controversial. I'm not sure how Porsche or why Porsche would shelve blocks and then later reuse them if they didn't pass inspections. And I guess the link to that is what they're saying is that early cars, the very early cars, we're talking early production, like this one, early 1998. And I think this, when they refer to early 99 cars, they're talking cars that were produced up to, I think, 7 of 98. I think anything after that is considered normal production. Early production cars, especially before the fire, are supposedly not seeing the bore scoring that later cars, especially 2001s, were seeing. And that was even a small percentage. Of course, they switched. This is the dual row IMS, and that's also a plus with the early cars. The dual row is more robust. It's got a much lower failure rate just because it has a dual row ball bearing, which distributes the load much better instead of a single thinner bearing. So, there's some attributes of why you might want to collect an early 99 car, and that's because it does have some of the cool things like the headliner. And is it a 993 just because it's got a 993 headliner? No, of course not. But I do like the throttle by the actual old school wire on throttle. That's really that was really something I wanted with this car. And the only reason why I settled for this car, I would say I settled in 2015 because I was looking for an air cooled car. I was looking to early retire from my IT job of 30 years. I was probably the early adopter of the FIRE community. If you don't know what that means, look it up. It's FIRE, Financial Independence, Retire Early. And that was always a dream of mine, to be able to retire early. And I'd say 2015, when I started looking at this car, air-cooled cars, like a sorted late 70s, especially an SC, was about $35,000, maybe $40,000. So this car was $15,000 from a private owner. And I could actually find it the next town over, which most of the air-cooled cars were like in California or other states. So I had spent several months looking for an air-cooled car that I didn't want to overspend. I could afford it. It's just I didn't want to. I wanted every penny invested so I can reach my goal of early retirement. So it's it was a compromise a bit. And so I test drove the car. My wife actually found the ad. And again, it was in the next town over. We said, why not? Let's just go take a look at it. And of course, after test driving, I fell in love with it. The car is quick. This car is significantly, will pretty much mop the floor with any 993. But that if you're into older air-cooled 993s and previous 964 generations and our stock non-turbos, of course, naturally aspirated, 0 to 60 and all-out acceleration isn't your main deal. You're really looking for the experience, the smells and stuff. And of course, this car is quicker, but there's my neighbor there. Of course, this car is quicker, but there's other things with the 911 that people look for. If you want all-out speed, you can go to like the current generation if you can afford it, a 992, 991. those are super fast. But even the base model, and this is about a 5-second car. I think they list it as 296 horsepower for the North American U.S. market, and it was basically 0 to 60 in 5.1 seconds. And I can tell you, after driving I have a daily driver 325 CI with a manual. This car is significantly quicker feeling, but that's because I'm coming from that car. If I was coming from an M3, I probably wouldn't notice much of a difference of that E46 generation. So there's the crest. I wonder if my 928 has that crest on it. Everything, thing's covered in dust. Yep. God, it almost looks like the same crest. This is a 79 928. So actually, one of the things that I'm struggling with is I have both of these cars listed in Marketplace. And I am struggling to let both of them go. I always complained about this one not having a sunroof, but all the 78, 79 cars, whether they're automatic or manual, again, this is a manual. This car has a limited slip, the 220 lot, which is pretty rare to have a manual in the American market and the limited slip option. So it's kind of the automatic 928 of the same year versus the manual are totally different feeling beasts. This one really feels like it gets up and goes. So what I wanted to do is, you're pretty much talking 2 cars plus a kidney for one air-cooled car. Because I originally set out in 2015 to get an air-cooled car and I didn't accomplish that, I mean, this thing looks, just looking at it here, it just makes me think, why am I trying to sell it? But I was going to go, I got both of these I got this listed for $23,000. This has got 103,000 miles on it. It's on the original IMS dual roll bearing, no noise, no nothing. The car runs perfect. It's even in the Marketplace video. I got to walk around with the car idling. It's covered with a little bit of dust now because I didn't put the car cover over it because I got people kind of calling, wishing, a little bit back and forth going on with people wanting to show up, not wanting to show up. I got out-of-state people asking about it. And then what I was going to do is, after I got that car sold, I was going to go ahead and fix the fuel tank crack on this one, just replace the tank, do all the fluid changes, clean it up a little bit, and get this one sold too. But it's sold as is right now. I got it listed for $8,000 because it is a pretty rare limited slip car, and it's got no rust. Of course, these are aluminum body panels on this car. But anyways, that's really what I wanted to do about this video. Is basically where I'm at is I'm trying to make sure I have this car valued correctly. But a lot of people on Rentalists and others say at 23 this is valued just right, maybe just a tad bit under, but the market was even higher last year for these cars. And again, you got people that are seeking out that don't really care which 996 they get. Some people don't want this generation, the first generation amber headlights, the lower amber parts, the original first fried egg headlights. I love these because these are from the GT race car. People made such a hoopla about it, but they don't know the racing pedigree. The reason why it had such a controversy when this car was released, not only because it was water cooled, the first water cooled car, but it was also the first car to have to differentiate from the different traditional headlights. And that's what really, but I think it's starting to grow on people because of its uniqueness and because of its, where the lights come from the GT car. And the funny thing is, I used to get hung up even after I bought this car about, I love the idea about dry sump boiling, but all your 911s, your air-cooled ones going back to the 60s and 70s and 80s, they have lines, they have a tank here, and your filters here on usually on the passenger side. It's always on the passenger side, at least in North America it is. And you have lines just like cooling lines on a water-cooled car that go all the way to the front, but to radiators, but instead they're oil coolers. So even though the older cars are air-cooled cars, the 993, the 964, the G bodies, those are still cooled by oil as well. Oil is a major contributor to the cooling. It's basically it's still liquid cool, but it's actually it's pumping the oil from the front to the back through oil coolers. So it's still kind of the same principle. So it's funny. The only thing, if you want to argue, is this has a scavenger pump. So if you go racing a lot, you got to be worried about oil starvation. And I'm not sure if that was ever a problem with this car when you club race it or whatever they do. I never would do that, but it was just a streetable daily fun driver for me. But when I look at it like this, we pull it out, take it for a drive, enjoy it like it is a nice day here in Illinois. It's about 55 degrees, December 7th. I am just like, I am just at the point where I don't even know if I want to sell the car. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens if I decide to sell it or not. So I thought there was some cool things that I would talk about for any 996 lovers. The car, like I said, is gaining traction. Maybe a little cult following. It's always had a cult following because it's been the most affordable 911 entry level, entry into the 911 category. So we'll see. We'll see. If I don't get any more bites on it, I think I'm going to keep it. And I may just sell the 928 and just get an air-cooled car, which is my goal, and keep the best of both worlds. The first water-cooled car and have an air-cooled car. So, and maybe next year. I'm not too concerned about this car. It makes no noise, no nothing. Like I said, it's got the dual IMS. Yes, it's got 103,000, and I have no service history on that. But I'm not really worried about it. Again, the theory is that these cars don't have a lot of the issues because of the fact that these are the earliest production cars. Now, I can't say that's true or not. I don't even, maybe the fire, obviously the fire caused them to force them to have to continue production. They had to use blocks that were x-rayed and didn't pass x-ray. And I believe people think that's what caused a lot of the de-chunking, the bore scoring. And you don't see it on cars that are produced earlier than 7 of 98. So who knows? It just might be a little bit of internet folklore, but I do, the differences I pointed out of the dash, the Buffalo Hide dash, the granite, part of the dash there, this being off the 993, the vinyl, and this later became Alcantara, the thick Alcantara. The early cars didn't have, it didn't have the glove box. You put your, under the steering wheel, you put your owner's manual there. I keep it in the house, but yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing the wrong thing by selling it. This car, in my opinion, and this is just a guess, and I could be wrong, I think this car will be dragged up like all other 911s as the other ones, the 997s, the 991s, the air-cooled cars get dragged up with just, increases in price and inflation. As those get dragged up, this car will become less and less affordable. And if the cult following starts happening where people do especially seek out these early production 996s, 99 996s, that's going to drive the market prices up too. So even if I just sat on it for a while, maybe at a later time decided to sell it or never sell it. I'm not in any financial position to have to sell it. So that one even is hard to sell because those unique options, it's the uniqueness of cars that get me all juiced up. And that's just this being an American car with a manual trans and a 220 limited slip. Driving this car is just, like I said, a totally different car from an automatic. I had an 80 European model that was imported here into the United States, and it was left-hand drive, of course. And it still, with the Mercedes transmission, it was slow to me. It just did not have the same performance level. This one, you can just, drop the clutch and it just goes. So with the limited slip, it still, leave dual marks on the pavement. So this car, like I said, doesn't have the limited slip option, but because of the reason why you never seen it ordered that much is because on 911, especially this generation, which got the improved rear suspension, the weight transfer and the engine and the transmission sitting over the rear end of the car, even in tracking, a lot of club racers reported that he didn't get inner wheel spin on turns that much. So it was really never a big issue with the 911 as it was, maybe with a front engine rear drive car like that. So yeah, if you find it interesting, go ahead and post it in a comment. And if there's any things I missed, go ahead and chime in. Okay, thanks.